Just continuing on here in chapter 19, finishing up our skin infections and talking about our eye infections. Now if we switch over to some of the viruses that lead to skin problems. So these are ones that cause either vesicular or pustular rashes. And there are three main ones that we're focusing on, though there are lots of others. So some of them can cause pox, so they all have fluid filled, but like chicken pox or smallpox. And then also hand, foot, and mouth disease are also going to be viral. So starting first with chicken pox, which is caused by the herpes simplex virus 3, typically mild disease. Now it can be life-threatening though if individuals are immunocompromised or older. There are vaccines now available for infants and children. And really more the idea with the chickenpox vaccine is to prevent shingles later on. So while chickenpox is pretty mild, shingles can be harder, and that vaccine isn't available until individuals are older. So by vaccinating against chickenpox, it ultimately prevents shingles. So we'll mention in the next slide. But there can be some secondary infections, and again, just this terminology. So somebody with chickenpox, the primary infection is chickenpox. That's what they were exposed to. But then they could get another infection due to chickenpox, and this would be like a strep or staph infection. And mainly that's from especially itching them and then getting those bacteria into those openings that can then cause additional infections. Again, I just mentioned shingles, but this is reactivation. So the herpes viruses are all latent viruses. Again, that terminology means that after they cause an infection, they can travel up through the nervous system and become dormant. So like cold sores that we get. So again, cold sores are also caused by herpes. But again, they can become dormant or latent and then get reactivated. So the herpes are the same way, same as genital warts. But in any case, with shingles, it's reactivation of that chickenpox. It's typically asymmetrical, so on one side or the other, depending on where they end up coming down the nerves. And it can come from multiple things that kind of reactivate them. So things like stress or x-rays, different drugs. Going into different parts of cancer can cause this as well. Again, as I mentioned, there is a vaccine that's available for adults, but they have to be over the age of 50 to 55 before they can get it. So individuals in between that, again, by having the chickenpox vaccine, it prevents them from ultimately getting shingles, which are much more painful on the individual. Now the hand, foot, and mouth, this is mainly in kids under the age of 5. So it again causes these lesions that we see here. They are painful spots. And it's called hand, foot, and mouth because those are where those blister-like spots are going to come from. So on the hands, the feet, even the genitalia, knees and elbows. So they're not restricted just to the hands, the feet, and the mouth, but that's the most prevalent place that they're seen. Again, caused by a viral infection of the enterovirus group and the Coxsackie virus in particular. So again, looking at both of these that are examples of vesicular pustular rashes. Again, chickenpox caused by the herpes virus, enterovirus, usually causing the hand, foot, and mouth. Again, modes of transmission. Now, whenever we talk about viruses, this is where the droplet contact is going to come in. So droplets are going to more readily pass on and transmit viruses more so than bacteria. So that's where we're more concerned about these droplet formations. As far as virulence factors, not a lot there for that. Enterovirus, some of the ones for chickenpox is they can fuse the cell and that just helps them move to other places. But again, they can have that latency where they're hiding out inside of our nervous system. We do have vaccination against chickenpox, not hand, mouth, and foot. And then again, treatment, there's typically very little for either one of these because the virus just kind of runs its course. Now, some of the maculopapular rashes, again, going back to that terminology. So these include measles, rubella, Fist disease, and roseola. We're only going to really talk about measles and rubella. So first here with measles, which is also called rubeola, which is very close to rubella. Again, just another name for the same thing. Unfortunately, we are starting to see increased cases of measles even prior to the onset of COVID. But before the vaccine was introduced, though, this killed millions of people every year. Unfortunately, due to a decreased amount of vaccination, we're starting to see measles reappearing because we need that 95% herd immunity. Again, where even if everybody's not vaccinated, as long as 95% are, the others are protective kind of indirectly. That's that herd immunity we've talked about before. Now, the rubella is a slight variation. This is German measles. So they're still causing that rash, typically with few complications, but the damage with rubella is really with the transmission to the fetus whenever it's exposed in the womb. So again, vaccination is important before conception because in the first trimester, it can either lead to a miscarriage or if not, permanent and multiple defects can be seen in the newborn. So this is transmitted to the fetus. So we get congenital issues with this one. So again, our summary table here, again, both are viral. So the measles virus versus rubella. Again, they're viruses. So that droplet contact is how these are going to be transmitted. As far as virulence, the measles can form syncytium, which is, again, the fusing or joining of cells. That's how they pass from one to the other, and it also helps them not be seen by our T cells. Now, the rubella can actually inhibit mitosis and cause apoptosis or programmed cell death, and it damages that endothelium of our vascular, so of our blood vessels that allow it to cause a lot of problems. Again, both of them are vaccinated against with the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella. So vaccination is important for both of these. Now, wart-like eruptions, so the most common warts that we see are going to be caused by the human papillomavirus. There are a few others that are out there, but this is predominantly what we see, including genital warts that occur. Now, some of them, especially with HPV and thinking about sexually transmitted, some of these can lead to cancer, but not all of them. And as far as genital warts, typically, not always, typically the strains that cause genital warts do not lead to cancer. It's those that cause more cervical issues that don't lead to the formation of the wart. And that's why pap smears are so important, is to keep up and to detect those. So again, some can lead to cancer, but not all of them. And then another viral condition that's similar to the warts is called molluscum contagiosum. And this is causing bumps that look similar to warts, so it kind of gets in this category. Now, warts are called papillomas, hence the name human papillomavirus, because they typically lead to warts. And again, typically more common in children. They are typically painless, elevated, but they're rough, gross on the fingers and can be in other body parts, especially the feet. There are plantar warts. So these are going to be deep and painful warts that are on the soles of the feet. So because they penetrate so far, they are more painful. And then there are also flat warts that are smooth and even skin colored lesions that develop on various parts of the body. And then that molluscum contagiosum. So this is kind of a smooth, waxy nodule that can be on the face, the trunk, and the limb. So again, a different, so that rough kind of structure like we see with the wart, this is kind of more waxy and looks smooth. It could be indented in the middle and can even have some kind of like milky fluid inside. Again, very common in the Pacific Islands like Hawaii. On the children, typically in the face, the arms, legs, and trunk. Adults get them more in the genital area. And then those that are immunocompromised, this can actually be disfiguring and more widespread. So kind of summarizing our warts and wart-like, again, the majority are caused by the human papillomavirus, but we do have the molluscum contagiosum viruses that can lead to these wart-like structures as well. Again, as far as transmission, mainly direct, auto inoculation, just meaning they can kind of spread once you get them, or indirect contact as well. Not a lot of virulence factors here with these. So again, not so much worried about the diagnosis or culturing. So because they're mainly caused by contact, avoiding contact is the best way to prevent these. Now moving into anthrax. So we have cutaneous anthrax. This is caused by another spore former. So again, these endospores. So Clostridium species we talked about with Gascon green. Bacillus species are the other spore formers. So Bacillus anthracis causes anthrax, and cutaneous anthrax causes this black eschar that we see over here, a very nasty looking thing. And this is where those endospores enter the skin and then germinate and cause the infection. Also, this is part of bioterrorism. So in 2001, there are bioterrorist attacks where those spores were intentionally sent as a weapon through the mail and through some other aerosolized events as well. Because again, they can remain dormant. Then whenever they come in contact with the skin, can cause issues, and if untreated, can lead to the death in about 20% of individuals. So now looking at these large pustular skin lesions. So again, our anthrax is here. I also included or left this leishmaniasis, and this is mainly just because it's one of the only ones in this chapter that we'll talk about that's caused by protists. So I don't care that you learn a lot about leishmaniasis because it's not very common in the U.S. It is transmitted by the sandfly, so avoiding those in other regions of the world is very important. But again, it's one of the protozoas, and it leads to this large pustular lesion like we see with anthrax. So Bacillus anthracis, again, direct contact. Again, those endospores are important for their virulence. They also form capsules that help them evade the immune system. They produce an edema factor and a lethal factor that allow them to be very harmful and pathogenic. Now moving on to ringworm, and this one unfortunately is very misleading. So ringworm, we think about the helminths and the worms. However, this causes cutaneous mycoses, and mycoses is a fungal infection. And specifically, they produce what are called dermatophytes. So we think about like the dermis, and then these dermatophytes are the ability of these fungal infections to produce the hyphae. There's like finger-like projections that they make, but they are confined to non-living epidermal tissue and their derivatives. So they can invade deep inside of the tissue. So again, it's just on the cutaneous, on the superficial levels. These are also referred to as tinea. Unfortunately, this is due to that erroneous belief that they were actually caused by worms. Instead, though, like we'll see tinea whenever we talk about the helminths, whenever we get more into the GI infections. But again, this is misleading, but that terminology was too ingrained to fix it. But again, so it is not caused by a helminth, but it is still referred to as ringworm. But they are caused by these tinea-like conditions due to fungal infections, though. And then they're named based on their location. So there's ringworm of the scalp, beard, just generally through the body, the groin, which is also called jock itch, the foot, which is also called athlete's foot, probably one you're more familiar with, and also of the nail, and some beautiful pictures here to the right that show each of these. But then each one is named based on its location. So again, tinea, even though it's not actually a helminth worm. Capitis is in the scalp. Barbae, because it's barber's itch, thinking about your beard. Corpus is more just the body. Curcus is in the groin. pedis, so we think about podiatry or the foot, and then unguium, which is the nail. So each one identified or named based on its location. Now there can also be superficial mycoses, and this is going to be that outer epidermal layer. So again, cutaneous, they're more like thinking about cuticle a little further underneath versus those that are more superficial. So an innocuous just meaning not very symptomatic. It's just cosmetic problems rather than actually an inflammatory effect. And this is referred to as tinea versicolor, which is also fungal. So it's called by Malassezia yeast, which are single-celled. But again, typically mild, kind of chronic scaling, but it interferes with melanocytes, which is what produces melanin and causes coloring. So it leads to kind of this discoloration of the skin. It can also lead, or other ones include folliculitis, cirrhosis, and psoriatic dermatitis. And this is just showing that discoloration that we see with the tinea versicolor. Again, our summary table here, so the cutaneous infections, this is going to be a little deeper of an infection versus the superficial, which is the tinea versicolor. Again, various fungi versus the Malassezia yeast. Again, our direct or indirect contact, whereas the versicolor is actually caused by an endogenous normal biota. So where the normal biota actually becomes infectious because it gets out of its normal location. Not a lot of virulence here to talk about. The cutaneous can cause hypersensitivity and has the ability to avoid the immune system, but we don't see any virulence with the tinea versicolor. Now into the eye, so looking a little bit at its defenses. So it's called the conjunctiva, which we can see here on the picture of the eye. This is a tissue that actually covers the eye and lines the eyelid. So it's kind of like a windshield to the eye. So not only being a protective layer, but it also creates fluid that helps lubricates and protects the surface of our eye. The best defense that our eye has is tear formation. So anything that decreases tear formation increases the likelihood of getting an eye infection. So it just flushes away microbes that could potentially cause a problem. Of course, it's aqueous, kind of an oil and mucus combination. And there's also what's called immune privilege, and we'll see this again with the nervous system. In an effort to protect our vision, there's very little immunity. So we don't have a lot of phagocytosis or inflammation in the eye. There's not a lot of T cell and B cell, like lymphocytes that move, or a lot of blood vessels that move through the eye. Because again, the inflammation by itself, no matter what is causing it, could lead to a loss of vision. So because of that, we want to protect vision. So we actually keep the immunity that's looking for an infection pretty low and rely on those tears to keep everything flushed out. The only condition we're going to talk about much in length here is conjunctivitis. So again, conjunctiva is that kind of tissue that protects the eye. So any infection in that tissue is called conjunctivitis, but it can be bacterial, which is typically seen by more of a milky discharge. Viral is more usually clearer. So again, the milky indicates bacterial, viral is clear. There can also be an allergic response to where, again, there's copious amounts, just meaning huge amounts, like watering of the eye, not as likely or not as much as we would see with a viral infection. We also get redness and eyelid swelling, regardless of the type, whether it's bacterial, viral, or just an allergic response. And then photophobia, which is this kind of a sensitivity to light where it hurts to look at the bright lights. And then kind of the informal name here is pink eye. So again, pink eye can be caused by bacterial or viral causes. So if we look at this, we'll also here separate out neonatal. So neonatal is separate because this is achieved not from contact or not from coming more from like our normal flora, but this is caused by transmission from the mom. And this is whenever there's some type of other condition like chlamydia or gonorrhea, so where the mom has an STD and they pass that on to the infant during delivery. So it's referred to as neonatal conjunctivitis. And it's separated because it's, of course, caused by different causative agents than what we see with bacterial conjunctivitis in an adult or even a child. That's caused more by things like staph, strep, Haemophilus influenza, which as the name implies can also cause the flu, is misleading that it doesn't actually lead to the flu. It can be caused, again, by Neisseria, gonorrhea, or chlamydia, but again, it is typically caused by something more that we come into contact with, either from our normal flora or contact with some type of agent. And then typically the most common is the adenovirus that we think about like with a cold, but there are other viruses as well. Again, the difference here is the contact. So vertical contact, again, it's coming from the mom, whereas bacterial and viral are direct or indirect contact. With those, we don't see a lot of virulence that we really talk about here. Prevention though, so screening the moms before and then also treating newborns immediately after delivery helps prevent conjunctivitis. And then good hygiene is important after delivery. All right, now these last few slides are just some additional ways of kind of seeing. It's nothing really new, but it's just a way of kind of summarizing the information in case these are helpful. Again, it has, whether it's mainly, what I want you to focus on is whether it's bacterial. So all of these on this slide are bacteria. I don't care that you distinguish between gram-positive and gram-negative, but again, just understanding the bacterial causes of different diseases, again, like impetigo. So we see Staph aureus causes lots of things. So impetigo, cellulitis, scalded skin, folliculitis. It causes necrotizing fasciitis. It can cause conjunctivitis. So again, lots of different infections can be caused by it. Again, we see all the diseases here caused by strep pyogenes. Some of them we get a little easier here with Clostridium causing gas gangrene, Bacillus anthracis causing anthrax. Strep pneumonia is one that can also cause conjunctivitis. But again, just kind of looking over these and determining, especially the ones we talked more about, the disease they can cause and whether it's bacterial or not. And then our viruses, again, I don't care so much that you know whether it's a DNA or RNA viruses, but the conditions caused by viruses versus bacteria, so things like chickenpox, warts, some conjunctivitis is caused by viruses like hand, foot, and mouth, measles, and rubella caused by viruses. And then looking at the fungi, so this is going to be that mycosis, so the ringworm and the superficial mycoses. Again, protozoa, we didn't talk really much about either one of these, but leishmaniasis and then keratitis, which is one of the eye diseases, they are caused by protozoans. And then there was a helminth. Again, we didn't talk much about river blindness, but obviously one that infects the eye. So there are organisms from all of the different types of microbes that can cause diseases in the eye and the skin. And then finally, just a nice little summary figure as far as the disease and whether it's bacteria like impetigo caused by Staph aureus or pyogenes, so it's in brown because it's bacterial, whereas others like conjunctivitis can be caused by viruses or bacteria. So again, just another way of kind of looking at these, figuring out whether they're bacterial, whether they're viral, or what's causing them.